At the edge of known spaces, humanity protects secrets that terrify the stars. The coffee was cold again. Commander Sarah Chen stared at the brown liquid in her cup and wondered when she had last tasted something hot. 3 months at Kepler Station had taught her that nothing stayed warm for long in the deep void between stars. She sat in the command center, watching screens that showed empty space. The station hung at the very edge of known territory, where human maps ended and the great darkness began. Most people thought they were here to study distant galaxies and strange energy readings. Most people were wrong. "Commander, we have something on the long-range sensors," called Lieutenant Torres from his station. His voice was steady, but Sarah heard the tension underneath. Sarah walked over to look at his screen. A small blip moved slowly across the display, still very far away but heading in their direction. She felt her stomach tighten. In 6 years of running border stations, she had learned that unexpected visitors were never good news. "How long until it reaches us?" she asked. "At current speed, maybe 18 hours, Torres replied. "It's not one of ours. The signal pattern doesn't match any human ship." Sarah nodded and touched her communication device. "Dr. Webb to the command center, please. Priority 1. While they waited, Sarah looked out the main window at the stars. They seemed different here at the edge, colder somehow. Behind them lay the warm glow of human space with its busy trade routes and crowded planets. Ahead lay only darkness and secrets that made her sleep badly at night. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived 10 minutes later, still carrying a cup of that terrible station coffee. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. His official job was xenoarchaeology, studying alien ruins and artifacts. His real job was much more complicated. "What do we have?" Webb asked, looking at the sensor readings. "Unknown ship, non-human design," Torres reported. "It's damaged. The energy signature suggests main power is failing." Webb studied the data carefully. Sarah watched his face change as he recognized something in the patterns on screen. After 30 years of studying alien technology, Webb could read ship designs like other people read books. "Sirathi," he said quietly. "Trade Federation vessel, probably a scout ship. They're peaceful people, mostly interested in commerce." Sarah felt some of her tension ease. The Zirathi were known to be reasonable and non-aggressive, but then she remembered where they were and what they were protecting, and the tension came right back. "Torres, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha encryption," she ordered. "Yes, Commander." While Torres set up the secure connection, Sarah walked to the classified terminal in the corner of the command center. She entered her authorization codes and accessed the files that only a few dozen people in human space were allowed to see. The screen filled with protocols and procedures that had been written in blood and desperation. The Shepherd Protocol was clear. Any alien vessel approaching the edge sectors had to be turned away, redirected, or if necessary, stopped permanently. No exceptions. No witnesses. No survivors who might carry word back to the wider galaxy about what humanity was really doing out here. "Commander, Earth Command is standing by," Torres announced. Sarah put on her headset and spoke in the coded language that kept their real purpose secret. "Control, this is Kepler Station. We have a lost sheep approaching the fence, requesting guidance." The reply came back 30 seconds later, after the message had traveled across dozens of light years. "Kepler Station, begin Shepherd Protocol. Full containment authorized. No compromise." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped they would never have to use the protocol. She had hoped the careful network of misdirection and false signals they maintained would keep curious aliens away from this sector, but hope was a luxury she could not afford. "Torres, activate the beacon array. Make it look like we're a research station studying cosmic radiation," she ordered. "Webb, I need you to prepare the cover story. Scientific expedition, peaceful intentions, the usual." Webb nodded. He had done this before, though never with aliens as smart as the Zirathi. "What if they ask to scan our databases?" "The Zirathi are known for being thorough. Then we give them the prepared files. If they dig deeper." Sarah left the sentence hanging. They all knew what happened if the deception failed. The next few hours passed slowly. The alien ship continued its approach, its distress signals growing stronger. Sarah used the time to review the station's hidden capabilities. Kepler Station looked like a simple research outpost, but beneath its peaceful exterior lay enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The weapons were old human designs, modified with technology that officially did not exist. "Commander, They're hailing us, Torres reported. Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded to Webb, who took his position at the science station, on screen. The alien face that appeared was reptilian but intelligent, with large eyes and a translator collar around its neck. When it spoke, the device turned its words into accented English. Human station, this is Captain Zalthek of the trade vessel Bright Current. We have suffered serious damage to our main systems. Request permission to dock for emergency repairs. Sarah smiled and hoped it looked genuine. Captain Zalthek, this is Commander Chen of Kepler Research Station. We'll be happy to help. Please transmit your technical specifications so we can prepare the appropriate docking bay. As the data came through, Webb studied it carefully. Standard Zarathi design, he reported quietly. Scout class but heavily modified. They've added some serious sensor equipment. Sarah felt a chill. The last thing they needed was a damaged alien ship full of advanced sensors poking around their supposedly innocent research station. But they had no choice now. The Shepard Protocol was in effect, and that meant bringing the aliens close enough to control them. Torres, guide them to Docking Bay 3, and activate the isolation fields. Yes, Commander. Sarah watched the alien ship grow larger on the screen as it approached. It was sleek and organic looking, like something grown rather than built. Scorch marks along its hull showed where weapons had hit it, and one of its engine pods was dark and dead. Captain, what happened to your ship? Sarah asked. The alien's large eyes seemed to look right through the screen at her. Pirates, Commander. We were exploring trade routes in the outer systems when we were attacked. We barely escaped. Webb looked up from his station with a worried expression. Pirates did not usually attack Zarathi ships this far from normal space lanes. That meant either the aliens had been somewhere they should not have been, or someone had deliberately driven them toward human space. How many crew do you have aboard? Sarah asked. 7, all in need of medical attention. Our life support systems were damaged. Sarah made her decision. We'll have medical teams standing by. Welcome to Kepler Station, Captain. As the alien ship settled into the docking bay, Sarah touched the concealed control on her chair that sent a signal throughout the station. It was a simple signal, just 3 short pulses, but every human on board knew what it meant. The masquerade had begun. Now they had to convince 7 intelligent aliens that they were simple researchers, while hiding the greatest secret in the galaxy. The secret that had driven humanity to the edge of known space and made them guardians of something that should never be disturbed. Sarah looked out at the stars one more time and wondered how many more lies they would have to tell before this was over. At the edge of known spaces, Part 2, the medical bay, hummed with activity as Dr. Reeves worked on the injured Zarathi crew members. Sarah watched through the observation window as the aliens received treatment for radiation burns and pressure injuries. They looked vulnerable on the human-sized medical beds, their reptilian features softened by pain and exhaustion. Captain Zalthek had refused treatment until his crew was cared for. Now he sat in the station's main conference room, his large eyes studying everything with uncomfortable intelligence. Webb sat across from him, maintaining the pretense of academic curiosity, while carefully steering the conversation away from dangerous topics. Your research must be very important to bring you so far from human space, Zalthek said, his translator rendering his words with a slight mechanical accent. Webb nodded enthusiastically. We're studying the cosmic background radiation in this sector. The data suggests some very interesting phenomena in the deep space beyond. Yes, we detected unusual energy readings as we approached. Our sensors showed some fascinating quantum fluctuations. Zalthek paused. Perhaps we could share data? The Zarathi Collective would be happy to contribute to scientific knowledge. Sarah felt sweat form on her forehead despite the station's cool air. The energy readings Zalthek mentioned were not cosmic phenomena. They were the carefully maintained barrier fields that kept something ancient and terrible contained in the darkness beyond. That's very generous, Webb replied smoothly. However, our research protocols require careful documentation before we can share preliminary data. You understand, I'm sure. Zalthek's head tilted in a gesture that might have been a nod. Of course. Scientific accuracy is important. His eyes seemed to focus more sharply on Webb. Tell me, Doctor, how long have humans been studying this region? The question hung in the air like a trap. Webb glanced at Sarah through the room's cameras and she gave a small nod. They had prepared for this. About 15 years, Webb answered. We established this station after detecting the anomalous readings from our inner systems. It was partly true. Humans had been in this region for 15 years, but they had not come here to study anything. They had come here to hide something that could destroy civilizations. Fascinating, Zalthek said. 15 years is a long time to study cosmic radiation. You must have accumulated vast amounts of data. Sarah decided to intervene before Webb could dig them deeper into lies. She entered the conference room with what she hoped was a professional smile. Captain, I hope you're feeling better. Dr. Reeves says your crew will make full recoveries. Your medical facilities are excellent, Commander. We are grateful for your assistance. Zaltek stood and performed what looked like a formal bow. However, I must ask about repairs to our ship. How long before we can continue our journey? Our engineers are examining your vessel now. The damage is extensive but repairable. I estimate 3 to 4 days. Sarah watched Zalthek's reaction carefully. 3 days would give them time to implement the full Shepard protocol. By the time the Zerathi left, they would carry false memories and altered data that would discourage any return visits to this sector. 3 days, Zaltek repeated thoughtfully. That will give us time to conduct our own studies of your interesting cosmic phenomena. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. I'm not sure that's necessary, Captain. Our research is quite comprehensive. Oh, I'm certain it is. But the Zerathi have some unique sensor technologies that might reveal different aspects of the same phenomena. Scientific collaboration at its finest. Webb cleared his throat. Captain, our research protocols are quite strict. We can't allow unauthorized scanning without proper documentation and approval from our home institutions. Zalthek's large eyes moved between Sarah and Webb. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Of course, the alien captain said finally. I understand completely. Perhaps you could show us what you have discovered so far. Even preliminary data would be educational. Sarah exchanged a glance with Webb. They were walking a tightrope now, trying to satisfy alien curiosity without revealing anything real. Dr. Webb, perhaps you could give Captain Zalthek a tour of our observation deck? Excellent idea, Webb agreed, standing quickly. We have some beautiful views of the local star formations. As they left the conference room, Sarah touched her communicator. Torres, private channel. Yes, Commander. What's the status on the Zerathi ship? Engineering teams are aboard now. Chief Martinez says the damage looks worse than it is. Most of their systems can be repaired in 48 hours. Sarah closed her eyes. 48 hours was not enough time. The Shepard protocol required careful preparation, and the Zerathi were too smart to be easily fooled. Torres, I need you to make some subtle modifications to their repair schedule. Nothing that would endanger the crew, but find ways to extend the timeline. Understood, Commander. Sarah walked to her private office and accessed the classified files again. The Shepard protocol had been used 17 times in the past 15 years, but never on aliens as advanced as the Zerathi. Previous visitors had been primitive species or small exploration vessels that could be easily misdirected. The protocol had 3 stages. First, convince the visitors that humans were engaged in harmless research. Second, gradually introduce false information about dangerous areas of space that should be avoided. Third, use carefully applied neural adjustment techniques to ensure the false information seemed completely natural and believable. Stage 3 was the part that kept Sarah awake at night. The technology they used was derived from artifacts found in the restricted zone, the same zone they were trying to protect. Using it felt like a betrayal of everything they claimed to stand for, but the alternative was worse. Her communicator buzzed. Commander, this is Chief Martinez. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The Zerathi ship has some advanced scanning equipment that we didn't know about. While we were examining their engines, they were passively scanning our station. I'm not sure what they detected, but they're asking questions about our power readings. Sarah felt cold despite the warmth of her office. Kepler Station's power systems were far more advanced than any research facility needed. The fusion reactors that powered their hidden weapons and containment fields were impossible to explain as scientific equipment. Did they get a complete scan? No, Commander. I managed to create some interference when I noticed what they were doing. But they definitely detected something unusual. Keep them busy with the repairs. I'll handle the rest. Sarah opened her personal files and began reviewing the psychological profiles of Zerathi trade captains. They were known for being persistent, logical, and extremely difficult to deceive. Everything about their culture emphasized honest dealing and thorough investigation. In other words, they were exactly the wrong species to encounter the biggest lie in human history. She was still reading when her door chimed. "Come in," Webb entered, looking worried. "We have a problem. Captain Zalthek is asking very specific questions about quantum field fluctuations in the deep space beyond our position. Questions that suggest he already knows more than he should." "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know if we've detected any artificial gravity wells or energy barriers in the region." "Sarah, those are the exact signatures our containment fields produce." Sarah sat back in her chair and looked out her office window at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of human sensors, ancient machines waited in the darkness. Machines that had already consumed entire civilizations and would consume more if they were ever awakened. And now 7 curious aliens were asking exactly the right questions to discover humanity's most terrible secret. "Webb, how long do you think we have before they figure out we're lying?" Webb was quiet for a long moment. "Based on their intelligence and the questions they're asking, maybe 12 hours. Less if they start active scanning." Sarah nodded and opened her secure communication channel to Earth Command. "When situations got this bad, there was only one option left. Control, this is Kepler Station. The sheep have sharp teeth. Requesting authorization for final solution." The response came back faster than she expected. "Authorization granted. Protect the fence at all costs." Sarah closed the channel and looked at Webb. "Get everyone ready. If we can't fool them, we'll have to stop them." At the edge of known spaces, Part 3, Sarah stood in the deepest level of Kepler Station, in a room that did not appear on any official blueprints. The walls were lined with displays showing images that most humans were never meant to see. Dr. Webb stood beside her, his face pale in the blue light from the monitors. "Tell me again why we're here," Sarah said quietly. "Tell me why we guard this place." Webb touched a control and the main display filled with an image of a dead world. The planet's surface was gray and lifeless, its cities still standing but empty of any movement. No plants grew in its soil. No animals moved through its streets. Nothing lived there at all. "This is Kepler 442b, Webb said. It was home to 6 billion intelligent beings called the Mordak. They had a peaceful civilization, advanced art, beautiful music. When our first expedition reached their system, we found only this." The image changed to show the interior of one of the alien cities. Buildings stood intact. Vehicles sat undamaged in the streets. But there were no bodies, no remains, no sign of what had happened to the population. "At first, we thought it was some kind of plague," Webb continued. "But the Mordak weren't just dead. They were gone. Completely gone. No genetic material, no bones, no trace that they had ever existed except for the cities they built." Sarah had seen these images before, but they still made her feel cold inside. "Show me the rest." Webb switched to another file. "We found 17 more worlds like this in the next system. All dead in the same way. All empty. That's when we detected the source." The display showed space itself, but space that was wrong somehow. Dark shapes moved between the stars. Too regular to be asteroids, too large to be ships. As the image enhanced, the shapes became clearer. They were machines, massive beyond human understanding, drifting silently through the void. "The Devourers," Webb said. "We don't know who built them or when. Our best guess is that they're millions of years old, maybe older. They drift through space in hibernation until something wakes them up. And we woke them up. Our first deep space expedition used experimental quantum engines that created massive energy signatures. The signature must have triggered their awakening protocols." Webb's voice was bitter. "We led them straight to inhabited worlds." Sarah watched the ancient machines on the screen and felt the weight of humanity's mistake. "How many worlds did they consume before we stopped them?" 43 confirmed. Maybe more. Each world completely drained of life. Every thinking being simply gone. Webb changed the display again. "But we learned something important. The Devourers don't just kill. They consume consciousness itself. Every thought, every memory, every dream gets absorbed into their collective intelligence." The new image showed human researchers in protective suits examining Devourer artifacts. Sarah recognized some of the faces from memorial walls throughout human space. Dr. Hassan's team was the first to make direct contact with Devourer technology, Webb explained. They discovered that the machines can extract and process conscious thought directly from living brains. It's how they feed. Sarah remembered the classified reports. Dr. Hassan's team had volunteered to study captured Devourer artifacts, knowing the risks. They had learned vital information before the artifacts consumed their minds. Their sacrifice had shown humanity how to fight back. That's when we discovered our advantage, Webb continued. Human consciousness has a unique structure. Something about the way our brains evolved makes our thoughts especially nourishing to the devourers. They prefer human minds above all others. So we used ourselves as bait. The only way to stop them was to give them what they wanted, but on our terms. We led the entire devourer fleet to this region of space, then activated the containment fields powered by human psychic energy. Sarah looked at another display showing the massive energy barriers that surrounded the restricted zone. The barriers looked like walls of light stretching between the stars, but she knew they were made of something far more precious. How many volunteers? She asked. Webb was quiet for a moment. 300,000 in the first containment. They linked their minds together and created a psychic barrier strong enough to trap the devourers in a pocket of space-time. 300,000. People had willingly sacrificed their consciousness to create the prison that held the ancient machines. They still lived, technically, but their minds were part of the barrier now, forever locked in mental contact with humanity's greatest enemies. The barriers need constant maintenance, Webb continued. Fresh human consciousness to replace what the devourers slowly consume. That's why we're really here, not to study anything but to feed volunteers into the containment system. Sarah felt sick. She had commanded border stations for years without knowing the full truth. How many people does it take? About 50 volunteers every 6 months. We recruit them from deep space crews who volunteer for classified missions. They know they won't come back, but they don't know exactly why. The display changed to show recent volunteers, men and women who had reported for duty at Kepler Station and disappeared into the restricted zone. Sarah recognized some of them, good people who had trusted their government and died to protect a galaxy that would never know their names. The Zarathi can't learn about this, Webb said. If word gets out that humans are using consciousness-based technology, other species will try to duplicate it. They'll wake up more devourers, or worse, they'll try to use the technology for themselves. Sarah understood now why the Shepherd Protocol existed. The knowledge of how to fight the devourers was almost as dangerous as the devourers themselves. Consciousness-based weapons could destroy civilizations just as effectively as ancient machines. There's something else, Webb said quietly. The barriers are weakening. The volunteers we've been sending aren't enough anymore. The devourers are learning to resist our containment methods. Sarah felt her stomach drop. How long do we have? Maybe a year. Maybe less. After that, we'll need a different solution. What kind of solution? Webb looked at her with eyes that had seen too much horror. We'll need to let them feed properly. A whole planet's worth of human consciousness might buy us another century to find a permanent answer. Sarah stared at the displays showing the dead worlds and ancient machines. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the barriers, the devourers waited for their prison to fail. When it did, they would spread through the galaxy again, consuming every thinking being they encountered, unless humanity fed them first. Her communicator buzzed, interrupting her dark thoughts. Commander, this is Torres. Captain Zalthek is requesting permission to launch a probe toward the restricted zone.
He says it's for scientific research. Sarah and Webb looked at each other.
A Zarathi probe reaching the containment barriers would reveal everything. The aliens would detect the psychic fields that trapped human consciousness, and the massive devourer fleet waiting beyond. Denied, Sarah said into her communicator. Tell him our research protocols don't allow unauthorized probes. He's insisting, Commander. He says their sensors detected something that requires immediate investigation. Sarah closed her eyes. The masquerade was falling apart. In a few hours, the Zarathi would know that humanity was hiding something enormous in the deep space beyond their station. They would demand answers, and when they didn't get them, they would try to investigate on their own. That could not be allowed to happen. Webb, how quickly can we activate the neural adjustment protocols? On all 7 aliens? At least 6 hours, and there's no guarantee it will work on Zarathi brain chemistry. Sarah made her decision. Then we don't have a choice. Alert the security teams. If we can't hide the truth, we'll have to make sure it doesn't leave this station. Webb nodded grimly. They both knew what that meant. 7 innocent aliens would disappear. Their ship would suffer a tragic accident, and humanity's secret would remain safe for a little while longer. In the darkness beyond the station, ancient machines stirred in their prison, sensing the approach of fresh consciousness. They had been patient for 15 years, feeding on the steady stream of human volunteers. But their hunger was growing and their patience was wearing thin. Soon they would need to feed properly again, and when that time came, humanity would have to choose between their own survival and the survival of every other thinking being in the galaxy.
At the edge of known spaces, Part 4, the alarm started as a low whisper, barely audible above the station's normal sounds.
Then it grew louder, more urgent, until every human on Kepler station knew that something had gone terribly wrong. Sarah ran through the corridors toward the command center, her mind racing through possibilities. Behind her, she could hear Webb breathing hard as he tried to keep up. Neither of them was prepared for what they found on the main display. "Report," Sarah ordered as she slid into her command chair. Torres looked pale. "Commander, the Zarathi launched their probe 15 minutes ago. We tried to stop it with our point defense systems, but Captain Zalthek created some kind of interference field around it." On the screen, Sarah could see the small probe moving steadily toward the restricted zone. It was still hours away from the containment barriers, but its advanced sensors were already detecting anomalies that no alien was supposed to see. More importantly, Torres continued, the probe's launch triggered something in the restricted zone. "We're detecting massive energy signatures from multiple sources." Sarah felt ice form in her veins. "Show me." The display changed to show the space beyond their position. What had been empty darkness for 15 years was now filled with lights. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all moving with the slow but purposeful motion of awakening giants. "The Devourers," Webb whispered beside her. The probe's energy signature must have activated their scanning protocols. Sarah watched the ancient machines begin to move in the darkness. After 15 years of hibernation, they were stirring to investigate the source of the new signals. Soon they would detect the barriers that held them prisoner, and then they would begin testing those barriers with the full force of their terrible intelligence. "Commander," Torres called out, "Captain Zalthek is hailing us. He's demanding an explanation for the energy readings his probe is detecting." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. The masquerade was over. There was no way to explain what the Zarathi were seeing without revealing the truth, but the truth would mean the end of everything humanity had worked to protect. "Put him through," she said. Captain Zalthek's reptilian face appeared on the screen, his large eyes burning with anger and suspicion. "Commander Chen, what are those energy signatures my probe is detecting? Those are not natural phenomena." Sarah looked at the alien captain and made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Captain, I need you to recall your probe immediately. You are investigating something that could endanger every intelligent species in the galaxy." "Endanger how? What are you hiding in that region of space?" Webb stepped forward. "Captain, please listen carefully. What you've detected are containment barriers holding something that destroyed 43 worlds before we managed to trap it. If those barriers fail, your people and mine will all die." Zalthek's eyes widened. "You're saying you've imprisoned some kind of weapon?" "Not imprisoned," Sarah said. "We're feeding it. We're keeping it satisfied so it doesn't break free and consume every thinking being in the galaxy." The silence that followed was broken by another alarm. Torres spun around from his station, his face white with fear. "Commander, the barriers are fluctuating. The Devourers are testing the containment fields." On the tactical display, Sarah could see the massive psychic barriers that held the ancient machines. The walls of crystallized human consciousness that had held firm for 15 years were beginning to show cracks under the pressure of thousands of awakening Devourers. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "At this rate, maybe 6 hours before they break through." Sarah turned back to Captain Zalthek. "Captain, we need your help. Your probe has accelerated their awakening process. If we don't strengthen the barriers soon, those machines will break free and spread through the galaxy." "What kind of machines?" Zalthek demanded. Webb answered. "Consciousness Devourers. They feed on intelligent thought itself. Every world they've touched has been left completely lifeless, every thinking being simply consumed." Zalthek was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "How do you strengthen these barriers?" Sarah felt her heart sink. "With human consciousness. We need volunteers to link their minds to the containment field. It's a one-way process." "You're asking my people to sacrifice themselves for a human mistake?" "No," Sarah said. "I'm asking you to help us fix a mistake that threatens everyone, including your people." Before Zalthek could respond, another alarm sounded. This time it was the proximity alert. Something was approaching the station from the direction of the restricted zone. "Commander," Torres called out, "we have multiple contacts approaching at high speed. They appear to be Devourer scout units." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The ancient machines had sent advance units to investigate the source of the probe's signals. In minutes, they would reach Kepler Station, and when they did, they would detect the rich concentration of human consciousness aboard. "All hands, battle stations," Sarah ordered. "Torres, activate the station's defense grid." Throughout the station, hidden weapon systems came online. Kepler Station transformed from an innocent research outpost into a fortress, bristling with advanced weapons. Energy cannons emerged from concealed ports, missile bays opened, and shield generators powered up to maximum strength. "Captain Zalthek," Sarah said urgently, "get your people to the escape pods." "We're about to be under attack. By what?" Sarah pointed at the tactical display. 3 dark shapes were approaching the station, each one the size of a large building. They moved without any visible propulsion, their surfaces covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the light from the station's searchlights. "Devourer scouts," Webb explained. "They're sent ahead to evaluate consciousness concentrations before the main fleet arrives." The first scout reached the station's outer perimeter and stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the station shook as invisible energy probed their defenses, testing the shields and scanning for signs of intelligent life. "They're looking for minds to consume," Sarah said. "Torres, fire all weapons. Don't let them get close enough for neural contact." The station's guns opened fire, sending streams of energy toward the alien scouts. The beams struck the dark machines and seemed to absorb into their surfaces without effect. The scouts continued their approach, unharmed by the most powerful weapons humanity could deploy. "Conventional weapons don't work," Webb said. "They absorb energy and convert it to power their consciousness-draining abilities." Sarah watched helplessly as the scouts moved closer. "Then how do we fight them?" "We don't. We can only delay them long enough to evacuate." But even as he spoke, Sarah knew evacuation was impossible. The scouts were already close enough to detect individual minds aboard the station. Their dark hulls pulsed with increasing energy as they prepared to drain the consciousness from every living being within range. "Commander," Torres said quietly, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup in the restricted zone. The main Devourer fleet is preparing to break through the barriers." Sarah looked at the displays showing thousands of ancient machines stirring in their prison. The barriers that had held them for 15 years were cracking under the pressure of their combined intelligence. Soon they would break free and spread across the galaxy, consuming every world in their path. "Webb," she said, "how many people would it take to repair the barriers?" "At least 1,000, maybe more, and they would have to be willing volunteers. Forced consciousness doesn't integrate properly with the containment matrix." Sarah looked around the command center at her crew. 23 humans and 7 aliens all about to die unless she found a solution. Outside, the Devourer scouts pressed closer, their hulls glowing brighter as they prepared to feed. That's when Captain Zalthek spoke up from the communication screen. "Commander Chen, there is something you should know about Zerathi physiology. Our consciousness operates on quantum frequencies very similar to human thought patterns." Sarah stared at him.
"What are you saying?"
"I'm saying that Zerathi minds might be able to integrate with your containment barriers. My crew and I volunteer to join the Matrix. Captain, you don't understand. It's a death sentence. Your consciousness will be absorbed into the barrier. You'll cease to exist as individuals." Zalthek's large eyes showed no fear. "But our thoughts will help protect the galaxy. It is a good death." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Here was an alien captain she had been prepared to kill to protect humanity's secrets, offering to sacrifice himself and his crew to save everyone. "It might not be enough," she warned. "Even with your crew, we'll still be short of the consciousness needed to repair the barriers." "Then we add the humans from this station," Zalthek said simply. "Including you, Commander. All of us together might be enough to hold the prison for another generation." Sarah looked around at her crew. They all knew what the alien captain was suggesting. Every person on Kepler Station would have to sacrifice their individual consciousness to save the galaxy from the ancient hunger that waited in the darkness. Outside, the Devourer scouts pressed closer, and in the restricted zone, thousands of their masters prepared to break free and spread across the stars like a plague of living darkness. At the edge of known spaces, Part 5, the decision took less than 30 seconds. As the Devourer scouts pressed closer to the station, Every person aboard Kepler station made the same choice. They would give their consciousness to save the galaxy, even if no one would ever know what they had sacrificed. Sarah stood in the station's central chamber, surrounded by machinery that had never appeared in any human textbook. The consciousness transfer devices were built from technology recovered from dead worlds, modified by human scientists who had paid for their knowledge with their own minds. 30 humans and 7 Zarathi stood in a circle around the central platform. Each person wore a neural interface crown that would extract their consciousness and feed it into the containment matrix. It was beautiful technology and terrible purpose combined into humanity's greatest achievement and darkest secret. "Commander," Torres said quietly, "the scouts are at the outer hull. We have maybe 5 minutes before they breach the shields." Sarah nodded and looked around at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, but they were also determined. Each of them understood what their sacrifice would accomplish. The galaxy would remain safe for another generation, maybe longer. "Captain Zaltek," Sarah said to the alien leader, "are you certain about this? Your people didn't create this problem." "You don't owe us anything." The reptilian captain's large eyes were calm. "Commander, my people have a saying. The darkness belongs to everyone. We cannot let it spread to our worlds, or to yours." Webb stood beside the central control panel, his hands moving over switches and displays that controlled the most advanced technology in human space. "The transfer process will take about 10 minutes. During that time, we'll be linked to the existing consciousness matrix. We might experience memories from the volunteers who came before us." Sarah felt a chill. 300,000 human minds were already part of the containment barriers. Their consciousness merged into a collective intelligence devoted to holding the devourers in their prison. Soon, 37 more minds would join them in that eternal vigil. "Will we still be ourselves?" asked Dr. Reeves, the station's medical officer. Webb shook his head. "Individual consciousness dissolves within hours of integration, but our combined will to protect the galaxy becomes part of the barrier structure. In a way, we'll live forever." The station shuddered as the Devourer scouts made contact with the hull. Through the walls, Sarah could feel the alien machines probing for weak points in their defenses. They were patient, but they were also hungry. Soon they would find a way inside. "Beginning transfer sequence," Webb announced. The neural interface crowns hummed to life, creating a low vibration that seemed to resonate in everyone's bones. Sarah felt the device against her skull grow warm as it began mapping her neural pathways. On the main display, she could see the containment barriers in the restricted zone. The walls of crystallized consciousness that held back the Devourer fleet were covered with cracks, glowing faults that spread wider with each passing moment. Soon the ancient machines would break free and begin their terrible harvest of intelligent life. "First stage complete," Webb reported. "Beginning consciousness extraction." Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation as if her thoughts were being gently pulled away from her body. Around the circle she could see the same expression on every face, a mixture of fear and wonder as their minds began to separate from their physical forms. Then the memories began. Sarah suddenly found herself experiencing the thoughts of Dr. Hassan, the researcher who had first made contact with Devourer technology. She felt his terror as the alien artifacts began consuming his mind, and his determination to learn everything he could before his consciousness was absorbed. Through his memories, she understood the true horror of what the Devourers did to their victims. The memories shifted, and Sarah experienced the first containment operation. She felt the collective will of 300,000 volunteers as they linked their minds together and wrapped their combined consciousness around the Devourer fleet. She felt their sacrifice become a living barrier that held back the darkness. More memories flooded through her mind. She experienced 15 years of volunteers feeding themselves into the containment matrix, each one adding their strength to the psychic prison. She felt the slow erosion of the barriers as the Devourers learned to resist human consciousness, and the growing desperation of the scientists who maintained the system. Second stage complete. Webb's voice seemed to come from very far away. Beginning integration with the containment matrix. Sarah felt her individual thoughts begin to dissolve into something larger. Her consciousness merged with the minds around her, and together they reached out to touch the vast collective intelligence that maintained the barriers. The contact was overwhelming. Suddenly, Sarah was part of a mind that spanned light years, a collective consciousness made up of hundreds of thousands of human volunteers who had given everything to protect the galaxy. She felt their combined will focused on a single purpose, keeping the Devourers contained no matter the cost. Through the collective mind, Sarah could sense the ancient machines pressing against their prison. The Devourers were older than human civilization, older than most of the stars in the galaxy. They had consumed countless species before humanity even existed, and they would consume countless more if they were ever freed. But now Sarah's consciousness joined with the others, adding new strength to the barriers. The cracks in the containment fields began to seal as fresh human and Zerathi thought patterns integrated with the Matrix. The psychic walls grew stronger, brighter, more resilient. In her final moments of individual consciousness, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The terrible secret that had driven humanity to the edge of known space would remain hidden. The galaxy would continue in ignorance of the darkness that waited beyond their borders, and 37 volunteers would join the eternal watch that kept that darkness contained. Integration complete. Webb's voice echoed through the collective mind, barriers holding steady. Through sensors throughout the station, the collective consciousness watched the Devourer scouts retreat in confusion. Without individual minds to consume, they had no purpose at Kepler Station. They returned to the restricted zone to rejoin their sleeping fleet, unaware that their prison had just become stronger. The station's automated systems activated, sending a message to Earth Command. Shepard protocol completed successfully. Kepler Station operational under new management. Months later, a relief crew arrived to find the station functioning perfectly. The official record showed that the previous crew had completed their tour of duty and transferred to other assignments. The new crew took their positions at the edge of known space, ready to maintain the masquerade that protected humanity's greatest secret. They never knew that their predecessors were still there, consciousness woven into the very structure of the station's most classified systems. They never knew that 30 human minds and 7 Zerathi minds now formed part of the vast intelligence that watched over the galaxy's darkest secret. In the restricted zone, the Devourers slept again, held in their prison by barriers stronger than ever before. The ancient machines dreamed of consciousness and freedom, but they would not wake again for many years. When they did, they would find the barriers still holding, maintained by a collective will that spanned species and sacrificed everything for the greater good. And at the edge of known space, new volunteers would arrive to feed the hungry darkness, keeping it satisfied with small offerings so it would not seek larger prey. The cycle would continue generation after generation, as humanity and its allies paid the price for an ancient mistake. The galaxy remained safe, ignorant of the guardians who protected it from the darkness between the stars. Somewhere in the vast collective consciousness that maintained the barriers, a part of Sarah Chen smiled at that thought. It was, she realized, exactly as it should be. The darkness belonged to everyone, but some were willing to face it so others could live in the light. In a universe full of ancient horrors and impossible choices, that willingness to sacrifice for others was humanity's greatest strength. And perhaps, in the end, it would be enough to keep the stars burning for a little while longer.